It was close to midnight when I heard the knock. 3 women from my building stood at my door, graceful, confident, yet carrying something unspoken in their eyes. I never imagined letting them in would change the way I felt about everything, including myself. It was late. The kind of late when the city outside feels like it's holding its breath. My apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car whispering by on the street below. I'd already convinced myself the night was over, the kind of night meant for silence and thought, not company. That's why the knock startled me. It wasn't loud, more like a soft rhythm, patient but certain. I froze for a second, listening, half expecting I'd imagined it. But then it came again, 3 even taps that seemed to echo down the hall. When I pulled the door open, I didn't know what to expect. What I found was something I never could have pictured. 3 women stood there. Not strangers, I'd seen them in the building before. Passing on the stairs, exchanging polite nods in the lobby, brief smiles as we collected mail. But standing together, close in the dim light of the hallway, they felt different, like a single, unexpected presence. The first woman met my eyes directly, her expression calm, almost too calm, like she had rehearsed being composed. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and there was a strength in her posture that drew me in immediately. Beside her was another, quieter, softer in the way she held herself. Her arms folded loosely, as if she wasn't sure she should be there, though her eyes betrayed curiosity and something warmer, something almost shy. And then the third, she leaned lightly against the doorframe, a half-smile at the corner of her lips, as though this midnight visit was her idea and she wanted to see how I'd react. I didn't say anything at first. My hand rested on the edge of the door, and for a moment it felt like time stretched thin, like I was standing in the pause between 2 heartbeats. The hallway smelled faintly of rain, it must have just started outside, and the soft yellow light above flickered once before holding steady again. "Sorry to bother you so late," the first one said. Her voice was low and even, though I thought I heard the tiniest edge of hesitation. We couldn't sleep. The words were simple, but they carried more weight than they should have. I didn't know if they meant it literally, or if not sleeping was just a way of saying they needed something more than silence in their own apartments tonight. I stepped back instinctively, my hand still on the door, my heart picking up pace. There was a part of me that wanted to ask questions: why me, why now, what is this? But another part, a quieter, deeper part, already knew the answer. Sometimes, without warning, people arrive at your door not because they need a place, but because they need you. And as the 3 of them stood there, graceful, poised yet quietly vulnerable in the glow of the hall light, I realized the night wasn't over after all. For a moment, none of us moved. The weight of the decision hung in the air between us: should I invite them in, or leave this moment stranded in the hallway, half-formed and fragile? I finally stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in," I said, my voice quieter than I intended, but steady. They entered with a kind of unspoken grace, each in her own rhythm. The first woman walked in with confidence, scanning the room quickly as if to take measure of the space. The second followed with slower steps, fingers brushing against the doorframe as though she needed something to anchor herself. The third was last, moving past me with a hint of a smile, her perfume faint but lingering, something floral that clung gently to the air long after she'd crossed the threshold. My apartment wasn't much: a small living room with a couch and a low table, a kitchen that bled into the space without walls to divide it. Still, as they settled in, it felt different, as if their presence had shifted the room's shape. "Tea? Coffee? Wine?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though the back of my neck felt warm with nervousness. "Tea sounds nice," the quiet one said, her voice carrying a softness that made me want to lean closer just to hear it again. I busied myself in the kitchen, filling the kettle. From there, I watched them. The confident one leaned against the counter across from me, arms folded, her eyes steady but not unkind. The soft one eased into the couch, curling her legs beneath her, her expression unreadable but not closed. And the smiling one perched on the arm of a chair, playful and at ease, as though she were testing how the night would unfold. Their voices filled the room in small bursts, light laughter, half-finished sentences, the easy way people sound when they're trying not to let silence grow too heavy. The kettle began to whistle, and I poured water into mismatched mugs, the steam curling upward in faint ribbons. When I handed out the cups, that was the first moment of touch. The quiet one's fingers brushed mine as she took hers. It was accidental, but the softness of her skin against mine sent a spark through me, small, but undeniable. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, and for a second longer than necessary, neither of us looked away. The smiling one, meanwhile, reached out to take her mug, her hand resting briefly on my arm. The pressure was light, but her warmth lingered even after she pulled away. The room grew warmer. Not from the tea, not even from the rain tapping at the windows, but from the closeness, from the unspoken sense that this gathering wasn't about drinks or small talk at all. They weren't here because they couldn't sleep. They were here because, for reasons I couldn't yet name, tonight they didn't want to be alone. And neither did I. The lamp in the corner cast a soft amber glow, just enough to hold back the darkness. Outside, the rain had settled into a gentle rhythm, steady and hushed, as if the night itself was leaning in to listen. We sat in a loose circle, each with a mug in hand. The steam curled between us like something alive, rising, fading, then rising again. At first, our conversation was light, harmless stories about the building, neighbors, the kind of chatter you use to hide the real things you're carrying. But slowly, the tone shifted. Their laughter quieted, their words turned heavier, more deliberate. It was the confident one who spoke first. She leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on her knees, eyes lowered to the rim of her cup. Some nights, she said, her voice low but steady, the silence in my apartment feels unbearable. I spend all day pretending I'm fine, but when I close the door at night, it feels like the world forgets I exist. Her honesty caught me off guard. There was strength in the way she said it, but also a fragile truth beneath it, like glass that looked solid but would shatter if pressed too hard. The quiet one shifted beside me, her shoulder brushing mine lightly. I know that feeling, she whispered, almost as if she didn't mean to. I've filled my place with books, music, little distractions, but it's not the same as hearing someone's voice, or just sitting with someone who notices you. Her words trailed, and her hand tightened briefly around her cup before relaxing again. The smiling one, who until now had seemed the most carefree, let her expression soften. She looked at me, then at the others, before admitting, I make jokes because it's easier than saying what I actually want. The truth? I hate going to bed alone. Not because of the bed, but because no one is there to see me. To say goodnight. To remind me I matter to someone. The room grew still after that. The rain tapped against the glass, filling the silence with a kind of gentle permission. I didn't know what to say, but maybe that was the point. They didn't need answers, they needed a place where the things they usually swallowed down could finally be spoken aloud. I found myself leaning forward, my elbows resting against my thighs, my mug cradled in both hands. I notice you, I said quietly, the word surprising even me. For a moment, none of them moved. The quiet one's eyes met mine, wide and searching. The confident one exhaled, her shoulders easing. And the smiling one tilted her head, her lips curving into something softer than her usual grin. As if without thinking, the quiet one reached across the small space between us and laid her hand gently over mine. Her thumb brushed once, a slow, hesitant stroke, before she pulled back. The contact was brief, but it left a warmth that spread through me, settling deep in my chest. The night had shifted. This wasn't small talk anymore. It was confession, raw, unpolished, and unexpectedly beautiful. And as I looked at them, one by one, I realized they weren't just neighbors. They were women carrying stories, loneliness, longing. And somehow, for tonight, they had chosen to share that with me. The words had settled between us, their weight still lingering. It wasn't a heavy silence that followed, not uncomfortable, but something else entirely. A silence that felt alive, as though it carried its own meaning. The rain pressed gently against the window, soft and steady, a rhythm that filled the pauses we didn't know how to bridge. The lamp's glow wrapped us in amber light, leaving the corners of the room in shadow. The world beyond my apartment seemed impossibly far away. I sat with my cup cooling in my hands, acutely aware of everything around me, the way the quiet one's shoulder rested just close enough to mine that I could feel her warmth, the way the confident one's gaze lingered on me longer than polite conversation usually allows, the playful curve of the smiling one's lips, even now subdued, as though she, too, was weighing something unspoken. My heart beat faster than the moment deserved. They weren't doing anything, not really. And yet, every tiny movement, every glance, every brush of air between us carried more meaning than words could hold. The quiet one shifted slightly, tucking her legs beneath her. In doing so, her knee brushed against mine. It was the faintest touch, but it stayed, not pulled back immediately. I felt the contact burn like a quiet flame, not intense, but steady. She didn't look at me when it happened, she just let it remain, as if to say, "It's okay, I'm here." The confident one rose and crossed behind the couch. She didn't have to touch me as she passed, but her fingers trailed lightly across the back of my chair, almost absent-minded, almost casual. Still, I felt the trace of her touch as though she had marked the space between us. When she stopped to lean against the wall, her eyes met mine, steady, searching, but with the faintest softness she hadn't shown before. The smiling one broke the silence with a breath that was almost a laugh, though she didn't say anything. Instead, she leaned forward on the arm of her chair, her chin resting in her hand as she studied me. Not playfully now, but with an openness that made my chest tighten. I realized then that the air was different. The usual barriers, the polite small talk, the cautious distance neighbors often keep, were gone. In their place was something fragile, unspoken, and far more real. I wanted to say something, anything, to ease the tension. But I was afraid that words might shatter it. So instead, I sat in the stillness, letting it stretch, letting it speak for us. And in that pause, I understood something I hadn't before. This night wasn't about coincidence or convenience. It wasn't about filling time or avoiding sleep. It was about recognition. About being seen, and allowing myself to see them in return. The rain deepened outside, the rhythm steady, as if reminding me that moments like this don't come often. Moments where silence says more than words ever could. And in that silence, I found myself wanting more. The silence eventually gave way, not with words at first, but with small movements, the kind that gently shift the rhythm of a night. The quiet one set her cup down on the table, the porcelain making the faintest sound against the wood. She leaned closer to me as she did, her arm brushing mine, and when she didn't move back, I felt the warmth of her skin settle against me like an unspoken choice. The confident one returned from the wall and joined us again, this time taking the empty space at the table rather than leaning apart. She crossed one leg over the other, her posture strong, but her eyes softer than before. She didn't say much, but the way she looked between us made it clear she was part of this fragile circle too. The smiling one, always the most playful, slid from the arm of the chair and perched at the edge of the table itself, folding her legs gracefully to the side. She rested her elbow on her knee, chin in her hand, her gaze flicking from me to the others with quiet amusement, not mocking, but as though she was enjoying watching us all settle into something new, something more intimate. The table became our anchor. 3 mismatched mugs still steaming faintly, hands occasionally brushing as we reached for them. The room felt smaller now, warmer, the kind of closeness that made me notice details I might otherwise overlook, the faint shimmer of the confident one's earrings in the lamplight, the way the quiet one tucked a strand of hair nervously behind her ear, the way the smiling one's foot tapped softly against the floor in a rhythm that matched the rain outside. I found myself speaking more than I expected, small stories, little pieces of myself I rarely shared. And they listened. Truly listened. Each time my words faltered, one of them would meet my eyes, steady and patient, as if to say go on, we're here. Then came the touches, subtle, unannounced, but unmistakable. The smiling one brushed my hair back lightly with her fingertips as she leaned across me to reach for her cup. The quiet one's hand found my shoulder when she leaned in to say something, her palm warm and gentle against me for just a second longer than necessary. The confident one reached across the table, her hand grazing mine as she gestured towards something I'd said, and though it could have been accidental, the way her fingers lingered told me it wasn't. It wasn't passion in the loud, obvious sense. It was something quieter, deeper, a closeness that built itself in the smallest gestures, the kind that carried weight precisely because they didn't need to be spoken aloud. Their laughter, when it came, was softer now, colored with something tender. Even their silences held meaning, threaded through with an intimacy that felt more real than words. As we sat there, our knees and arms occasionally touching, none of us pulling away, I felt it clearly, this wasn't three women visiting a neighbor anymore. This was us, together, forming a circle where each of us belonged, if only for this one night. Time passed without us noticing. The rain, steady and persistent, had become a kind of background song. The lamp was the only light still burning, its glow dimmer now, softer, as though it, too, knew the night was coming to an end. It was the confident one who finally spoke, her voice quiet but sure. "We should probably go," she said, though her tone betrayed her words. She didn't sound ready to leave. None of them did. They moved slowly, almost reluctantly, gathering their mugs and setting them aside on the counter. I stood too, unsure whether to guide them to the door or let them take their time. In the end, I didn't need to decide. They lingered on their own. The quiet one slipped into her coat but didn't button it, standing close to me as though the space between us had grown too small to stretch again. She looked down at her hands, then up at me, her gaze steady and searching. "Thank you," she whispered, and it was more than gratitude for tea or company. It carried a weight that pressed gently against my chest, something unspoken but deeply felt. The smiling one moved next, setting her empty mug on the counter with a soft clink. She stepped toward me with her familiar ease, but this time, her playfulness was tempered by something warmer. She leaned close, her perfume subtle and sweet, and pressed her lips to my cheek. It wasn't quick. It lingered just long enough for me to feel the softness of her mouth, the warmth of her breath. When she pulled back, her eyes held mine for a heartbeat, a silent question hanging between us. Then the confident one approached. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate. She placed her hand flat against my chest, just over my heart, her palm warm through the thin fabric of my shirt. She held it there, steady, her eyes never leaving mine. My pulse betrayed me, racing under her touch, but she didn't move. For that single, quiet moment, it felt as though she was listening to the rhythm of my heart. When she finally pulled her hand away, the absence of her touch felt almost louder than the touch itself. Last was the quiet one. She hesitated, then stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. Not quickly, not politely, but slowly, with intention. Her cheek rested lightly against my jaw, and I felt her breath warm against my neck. I closed my eyes, letting the steadiness of her hold sink into me, and for a moment I wished the night would never end. When they finally moved toward the door, I followed. The hallway beyond seemed colder, emptier, compared to the warmth we had shared. They each looked back once more, small smiles, soft eyes, as if to say this isn't over. And when the door closed, leaving me in silence once again, I stood for a long time with my hand still against the wood, my skin remembering every touch, every glance, every breath of the night we had almost, but not fully, crossed. The apartment was still when I woke. Pale morning light filtered through the blinds, cutting thin silver lines across the floor. The rain had stopped sometime in the night, leaving behind the faint smell of wet pavement drifting up from the street below. For a moment, lying there, I wondered if the entire night had been a dream. But then I stepped into the living room. 3 mugs still rested on the table, each with a trace of tea left behind. A coat button glinted on the couch cushion, forgotten in the quietness of departure. And the air, though subtle, still carried the faintest hint of perfume, layered like a memory you could breathe in. It hadn't been a dream. I found myself standing in the middle of the room, staring at the space where we had sat, where we had leaned into each other, where silence had said more than words. The weight of it pressed gently against me, not heavy, not overwhelming, but real. A night that could have been ordinary had turned into something I knew I'd carry with me for a long time. Later that day, I stepped out into the hallway. The building was awake now, doors opening, footsteps echoing, the everyday rhythm of neighbors living side by side. I almost convinced myself the women would act differently in daylight, that perhaps the closeness of last night would fade into polite nods and nothing more. But I was wrong. The first one I saw was the confident woman. She was unlocking her door, her posture as strong as ever. Yet when she turned and saw me, her expression softened instantly. She didn't say much, just offered a small, steady smile, one that reached her eyes. It wasn't the kind of smile neighbors exchange in passing. It was the kind you give someone who has seen a part of you most people never get to touch. A few steps down, the quiet one appeared, carrying a bag of groceries. She paused when she noticed me, adjusting the bag against her hip. Her gaze held mine for a moment longer than necessary, and when I reached out instinctively to take the bag from her, our hands brushed again. She let me help, and the faintest pink rose in her cheeks. Neither of us spoke, but the silence between us was easy now, gentle, full of what had already been shared. And then, as if timed by fate, the smiling one came up the stairs. Her hair was damp from the morning air, and she was humming softly to herself. When she saw the three of us standing there, she laughed, that light, effortless laugh that seemed to tie everything together. "Well," she said, her eyes flicking playfully from one to the other, "looks like we're all awake now." It was such a simple moment. Just four people standing in a hallway, daylight streaming in through the stairwell window. Yet I felt it, the thread between us, delicate but strong. Last night hadn't been a mistake. It hadn't been an accident. It was a beginning. And as we lingered there, exchanging small words, shared smiles, and subtle glances that carried more than any of us would dare admit aloud, I understood that the knock on my door had opened more than an evening. It had opened the possibility of something quietly extraordinary, not just with one of them, but with all three. A circle of warmth that, somehow, had room for us all. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more slow burn romances. Your likes and comments mean a lot, they help these stories find others who need a little warmth, a little connection, just like this. And tell me, what would you have done if three women knocked on your door late at night?